Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is Maria Redmond from the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy here for the state of Wisconsin. And I'm excited that you chose this industry conversation versus the others. I know you had a couple of different options. So I'd encourage you, if we have the ability with bandwidth, to turn on your videos, show yourselves, engage in the conversation. I'm going to be showing a few slides to kind of get us started, but certainly this is just an introduction to the state energy plan, the state clean energy plan. And the intention here is to really just introduce you and then, get your feedback. You've spent the last 2 days listening to a lot of great presentations and hearing about what's going on here in the state of Wisconsin. And I just would love to get some feedback as we start to move into our clean energy planning process and really crafting out policy ideas and strategies to move the needle here in the state. This is just an opportunity for you to have another voice and talk to me about what your thoughts are, what you've learned, what you'd prioritize from your perspective. So I'll set up the conversation here. I don't know if Renew, if you have any comments or anything like that, or if I should switch over to my slides. I don't know if Jim has joined or, okay. I will switch over to my slides now. Ooh. Okay. Are you guys seeing my slides?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you. Not yet. Okay. Let's do this. Share screen. How about now?
It's coming. There we go. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the feedback. Is anyone out there? Okay, great. No, I'm going to set up the framework for the discussion, but certainly I would love to have you provide some input. We have 30 participants, so, I'd encourage folks to go ahead and chime out, but if you feel like you're not able to hop into the conversation, feel free to raise your hand and I can call on you too, because I want to just make sure everybody gets a chance to chime in. I took this opportunity to take advantage of the industry conversation because, again, a lot of you have been attending over the last couple of days, and we've been talking about the clean energy economy. You've heard my bosses, Lieutenant Governor and Joel Brennan, the Secretary of Department of Administration, talk about our priorities as it relates to people, environment, and the economy here in Wisconsin. And the thought process here is, we want to make sure that whatever policies we pull together for the state, and we really want to have high impact here in the state, we need to be thinking about people, equitable access to clean energy, reducing energy burden, thinking about prioritization of environmental justice and energy justice, just transition as we start to think about the closure of coal facilities and the opportunities for renewable energy or energy efficiency type jobs that we're transitioning traditional fossil fuel jobs over to renewable jobs, but also thinking about the opportunities for expanding the renewable energy jobs to low-income communities or communities that, those great paying jobs could benefit, and improving health and looking at the social aspects of deployment of clean energy. Also looking at our environment, how are we using our land, how our emissions would benefit from the deployment of renewables, clean energy, and efficiency, and really focus on those missions and those opportunities for high impact emissions reductions as part of our efforts to reduce our contribution to climate change and carbon emissions here in the state. And then, of course, one of the big ticket items, of course, is the reduction of the money leaving the state for our energy needs. How can we look to Wisconsin again? How can we be more energy efficient? How can we look to the resources, renewable resources that we have here in the state to deploy clean energy and keep businesses here and just build our economy and the clean energy economy here in the state. So just so you, from my perspective, we are launching a clean energy planning process. I want to jump into that. I don't want to do all the talking here. I want to get your ideas. I want to open up the dialogue here. But we have developed a list of key strategies, over 100 key strategies, looking at a lot of different strategic planning processes through the Mid-Continent power sector roadmaps with building, transportation, and power. Looking at U.S. Climate Alliance and what's happening across the nation, the Wisconsin Energy Distribution Technology Initiative, kind of bringing all these strategies together to try to figure out how do we prioritize and what do we prioritize. Environmental justice and equity is something that we're addressing across all sectors, and we need to come up with some analysis and metrics associated to that, and engagement plans related to environmental justice as it relates to deployment of clean energy here in the state. So what are, coming out the gate, what are low effort, high impact opportunities, especially as it relates to environmental justice, economic drivers and emissions reductions, but then also thinking long term, and how do we create the path forward and create the pathway and the plan and adjust along the way as it relates to deployment of technology and reality. What we're dealing with today will be very different than what we're dealing with a year from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. So there's a great discussion yesterday about like the next 10 years and what is the forecast for the next 10 years. And so what we're trying to do is create that framework so that we can really show success in the next 10, 20 years and really make an impact. So I just wanted to frame that up. What I'd like to do is open it up. I've got 3 slides that kind of break things down. Again, we're looking at sectors and we're looking at key strategies. And so I'd just like to open it up. If anyone has any questions on sort of what I'm trying to gain here, it's just more of an open dialogue of what you think would be good policy or ideas that would help to move the needle as it relates to these different particular topic areas. So the first one I wanted to throw out there was there's a lot of discussion about environmental, climate, and energy justice. So does anybody have, after what they've heard or what they're working on, do you have some ideas on how the state should address this particular area?
You just want us to speak up, or?
Yeah, go ahead and speak up. Just chime out. If not, I might start calling on people. No.
Yeah, this is Don Ferber with the Sierra Club. It's not in the main track of this conference, but on this topic, the governor has $1 billion for the I-94 highway expansion in Milwaukee. That's a tremendous amount of money at a time when the budget is already stretched. It will add to the pollution that we're emitting in our state at a time when we need to reduce it. It adds to a lot of inequities and further divides neighborhoods. And that money would be much better used in terms of energy justice to do mass transit and other projects that would reduce emissions and serve people better, and perhaps to provide more jobs too. So I just think that's a major issue in the budget that, or that has been budgeted for, that hopefully can still be stopped and put into uses that are aligned with the values that have been expressed in the clean energy plan.
Thank you, Don. Sorry, I thought I was unmuted there. Any other thoughts on this?
Hi, Maria. This is John Greener from the Wisconsin Academy. I think one of the things I'm interested in, I know clearly there's a number of organizations that are working in this area. And I think many of us are also, in addition to kind of thinking about the outcomes and impacts that are so important to us, also kind of spending some time looking internally, kind of doing our own diversity, equity, inclusion work and thinking about how that informs and allows us to kind of really move forward in a way that, that we're really kind of deeply understanding and grounded in this work, and are doing the work ourselves. And yeah, I just think I'm increasingly interested in what other organizations are doing on that front, and what kind of tools others are using to move forward in that capacity.
Is there anyone on the call that can speak to that a little bit more? I mean, I know that what we as a state are trying to do as it relates to further analysis and engaging different organizations and trying to come up with, specific metrics and things like that. But I don't know, maybe if there's somebody on the call, I would open it up, or on the virtual meeting that would want to speak to that.
I'm just curious if you're speaking in terms of organizational engagement and transformation, John. At that level, I mean, I am aware of a number of opportunities, and I know that, well, in particular, there are two climate change organizations with chapters in Madison, Citizens Climate Lobby and 350, that have organized to participate in the Nehemiah project, or Nehemiah/Justified Anger's African American History course. And we sat down with some of their staff a while back and just talking about what can we do to address equity. And part of their suggestion was take this course, get as many people as you can to do it, and learn about why we are where we are today, what the historical roots are, and maybe that will help you do your work so that then we aren't piling up microaggressions when we say, where are all the colored people, in quotes, well, because every time they show up, they get hurt.
Yep.
So that's one. I was also able to participate in a program that Gathering Waters and a couple of other conservation groups are putting together. The last of 3 sessions with August Ball, if that name rings a bell, Cream City Conservation Corps, I think it is. She's a great speaker, great trainer, and anyways, so just because that's what you're asking about, and Maria said, let's offer something we can. We are drifting a little afield perhaps, but I think we got to, just like we're saying all around, all of the above, we have to kind of do not just solar, but wind, not just wind, but biogas, not, with equity, we need to work at individual levels, organizational levels, and state levels with policy and the like.
Right. Yeah. No, thank you very much. And, I do wonder if, at some point it might be interesting to, if there could be a meeting or a small, summit to even, to kind of look at what we're all doing and how we can be a little more synced up on that front. But they're all very useful. Thank you.
Yeah. And you said you're with Wisconsin Academy of Science, Arts, and Letters?
Exactly. Thank you.
You'd be a wonderful organization to convene something like that. Thank you.
I was going to mention that if you, just logistics, if you wanted to say where you're from, that would be really helpful, or who you're affiliated with, that would be great. And then also too, for those of you who kind of want to sit in the background or chime in via chat, feel free to do so as well. I can bring up some of the comments that are made in the chat box as well. But I think one of the things that that I am thinking about are metrics, and how do we get specific to Wisconsin, and what communities are we targeting, and how do we really dig deep and hone in on specific communities in this realm. I think we have to be specific. We've all recognized that this is super important, but the specificity and the direction is super important as well.
Maria, I guess I'd like to, this is Alicia Leinberger, and I'd like to chime in this idea that we're working on to work with basically weatherization and energy assistance programs, which are already working with the most vulnerable folks for bill assist and trying to help with housing stock and work there. Those folks are working really, really hard, and to align with them to use some of that funding to create community solar, so distributed solar offsite that can be very economically, we can install it for very inexpensively over the lifespan, whereby the kilowatt hour can be stretched. You know, you can have kilowatt hours for many, many years when they can just be used to credit those meters, those low to moderate income meters. And we often talk about involving those communities further by offering training programs in those same, while we're building solar, or we're working on switching over the HVAC to more efficient electric versus gas, or in rural areas, we see a lot of propane, which can really get out of hand for folks. So I guess the whole idea is just, I guess it's like a cross fertilization with the people that we're working with are the CAP organizations, which cover almost the whole state and already are working directly with a lot of these folks, and would like to be working with more of them. So yeah, hopefully we'll have some real some live pilots to show off after 2021, and it'll be more clear perhaps. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Alicia. You know, one question I have for you is, you know, we're talking about what I'm interested in is like policy, and like what is a specific policy need? Like what is the driver to make change, and what does the state need to adopt as policy to help facilitate this? And so, you know, Alicia, from your perspective, it would probably be some direction to weatherization, right?
Yeah.
That program. Mm-hmm.
Which is,
I mean, and I want to throw that out to the group. You know, what is the specific policy that would help move the needle and to really address this?
Well, one policy.
In a perfect world, what do you wish for?
In a perfect world, I wish we wouldn't have to worry about all this. It'd all be taken care of already.
Right.
But given that it's not a perfect world, I was going to just raise along the lines of what you're saying. I've been almost overwhelmed with all the different strategies and technologies and inputs and outputs, and it's like, okay, where, you know, it reminds me, I think it was Aristotle, give me a place to stand and I'll move the earth. It's like, where is the place we can stand that gets the leverage? And one idea I'd throw out there, and I'll confess that it is a key policy emphasis of Citizens Climate Lobby, is, well, right now the lead bill is Energy Innovation Carbon Dividend Act at the federal level. And basically that leverages things by putting a price signal into the marketplace so that fossil fuel is going to be more expensive across the board. What are you going to do about it, economy? And then businesses and individuals all start shifting. And to offset the cost impacts for the public at large, that fee that's collected off of fossil fuel production is fed back as a dividend, as essentially a rebate. It raises the question of what can the state do? Can the state leverage its own political power and access to our representatives to push for that at the federal level? And or can the state find out some local implementation of that might, one, be effective at sending that price signal, broadly across the marketplace, not just in these little narrow niches that we keep on falling into. And two, create more pressure for a uniform federal approach, so we don't have this patchwork quilt of state approaches. But a state approach is going to be better than no approach.
Yeah. Hi, this is Andy Bingle, and I'm actually out in Colorado. I've been studying a little bit about Colorado's policies regarding solar and different things. But Maria, I think you're asking for different policies that might help this. Well, as you know, there isn't just like one policy. I wish there was like a silver bullet, but there's a lot of different policies that can help. And I think one that has helped out here, and I believe Wisconsin, for the community solar out there, is all by each utility. I don't think they have like a large legislation for statewide legislation for community solar gardens, but out here in Colorado, we have a community solar legislation, and there's a low income carve out. So a certain percentage of those community solar gardens have to go to subsidize low income communities, which I think is an interesting model, one model to go with. And then another thing that we're working on out here is the just transition, especially up in northwestern Colorado. There's a lot of just transition. There's actually a just transition office focused on not only helping the workers, but also the communities kind of get past coal. But I think what's interesting as well is there's also need for also natural gas, and natural gas communities or communities that are a little based off of natural gas too here. And so that conversation is shifting. So like you said, kind of thinking about 10 and 15 years away, we're going to have to think even past coal on just the just transition and think into some of these other fossil fuels that would be possibly retiring. So those are two things that stick out to me: the community solar projects, and then also just transition legislation.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you, Ken. Hi, Ken.
I'm joining the conversation a little bit late here, but I thought I'd chime in with at least two suggestions that won't cost you any money on the part of the state. One would be if we were able to clarify the legality of third-party ownership in our state. That would bring a lot of private held capital into the public sector for investing on schools, churches, and nonprofits that cannot otherwise capture the federal tax credit value. And that brings money back from the feds to the state of Wisconsin. So that's a net positive because it brings money back into our state economy. And I think another one that other states have done that might be worth looking at is making amendments to the net metering caps for public buildings. If we're looking at things like police stations, fire stations, and schools, there's states that allow those facilities to net meter up to their total consumptive load. And that's something that benefits every single taxpayer in the state because we all pay property taxes to support those buildings. So I think those are two policy changes that could be made that don't cost the state anything, but benefit everyone tremendously.
Thank you. Everybody froze on my screen, so hopefully y'all still here.
I have a couple thoughts about how beneficial both large-scale renewables and participation in the carbon market can be for our rural communities. We continue to lose jobs, we continue to lose young people, and they continue to lose income in much of rural Wisconsin. And so I think these are two elements that provide hope, but it's kind of an unknown in rural areas. What does this mean? What does it look like? So I feel like one piece of it would be investing in educators to help develop those understandings and maybe do tours, case studies, whatever it would be, could be extremely beneficial to those areas. And then from a policy standpoint, a lot of these areas have interspersed wetlands, shorelands, wildlife concerns, and those sorts of things. So I think that asking the DNR to do some studies to really understand potential impacts, so that if they are able to provide flexibility, let's say having solar isn't a major concern in certain conditions where other building wouldn't be allowable, they can adjust those policies to allow building. I'm not saying that you can or you can't, but they have to do the studies first, and asking them to really focus on that so that they can evaluate their policies is really important. It may even be changing things like the size of the grid of the fencing, to accommodate animal movement in and out of it, or, there's little tweaks that may need to be done, but I don't know that they have the understanding to make those policies at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. I'm going to keep my slides off, but just kind of moving into sort of out of environmental justice, climate justice. I think we're kind of organically doing that anyway. The next one was power, buildings, and transportation. And again, a lot of discussion has been happening over the last few days on storage and grid modernization and microgrids and so just trying to, what are your thoughts on power, buildings, and transportation? What do you think are policies that the state should be looking at to help move the needle? I'm leaving these very open and ambiguous because I would love to get your ideas. I realize that it covers a lot, but certainly I know that you guys are you have that subject matter expertise from your perspective. So this is just your opportunity to have an open forum to talk about what your wish list is and what you would hope that we could do.
This is Alicia Leinberger again. I'm in Viroqua, Wisconsin. I didn't say that before, but kind of I think this fits in here, and it kind of goes off of what Ken was saying about removing the net metering limit for municipal buildings, municipally owned buildings. I wonder if it seems like municipalities and schools, things that are publicly owned, should be some of the low-hanging fruit to have them connected to community-owned generation, basically, where you would have. So I don't exactly know what the policy would be, but maybe there's some sort of state property tax credit. I guess I haven't thought through it completely. I just know what the problem is. So the problem, and it would be fun to think about that. Like, what could you do? But the problem is that we're all putting our tax dollars into these black holes of energy companies, and in the meantime, they're not responding the way that we would like. And if we could get control of the cost of our power that way, I know I've been doing some work for some different municipalities and showing them just how much they can save over the life of the system, and it's in millions of dollars. And so it seems like at the state level, if we had some policy that would be very encouraging to municipalities to find ways to incorporate community-owned on-site generation and efficiency measures.
And Maria, you mentioned energy storage and microgrids, which are kind of technologies that are just sort of on the margins or the thresholds of being economically viable right now for most projects. And if you think about the places where those are, I think, most appropriate are police stations, fire stations, and schools that serve as like emergency response centers. And, you know, maybe to make the economics pencil out for that, we need to be thinking about, you know, does there need to be a new program at Focus on Energy with incentives specifically for those sort of resilient structures to encourage that kind of development? Or is there, you know, some other state program that sponsors that sort of thing? Because right now for a school or a municipality to pursue that on their own, it's really difficult to justify the expense to taxpayers without some sort of, you know, policy tweak or financial incentive to make those things viable.
Maria, this is Scott Blankman, and maybe to build off of that, I think some of the things that other states have done, such as Massachusetts, where they have taken a fresh look at their Focus on Energy program and realized that the lines were being blurred, increasingly being blurred with storage and more innovative technologies to differentiate and not have the clear line of distinction between energy efficiency program or peak shifting or peak shaping programs, would be some of those tools that could potentially help encourage, you know, the fair price signals coming to some of these other technologies like storage that was recently talked about. And I know that there have been some states such as Michigan who have been looking at, you know, more concepts of clean peak standards that again would be trying to take advantage of the more distributed generation that's out there, more solar that's coming out there, some of the larger scale storage that's out there, and be able to have those needs met, you know, the consumption, the peak needs met by more of those distributed resources and by shifting consumption based off of what the grid needs. And I know the utilities, you know, are looking at trying to be more proactive in that realm. But if the state would have, you know, a long-term vision of trying to get to that sort of future state, I think that would allow for a lot of these resources to be more optimally utilized, as opposed to, you know, trying to just do it through net metering policies or just kind of one-off, but having more of an integrated approach.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, I'll just second Scott on that. I think that it's really innovative. Some of like the SMART program that they have in Massachusetts, just making sure that you're incentivizing different technologies at different levels, I think is important, and their value to the grid and value to the future of Wisconsin and different things going forward. I think one thing that I've been looking at and pretty interested in recently, and I think it could get pretty easy bipartisan support, and this is kind of thinking of ecological influences of solar, since we're getting some huge solar projects as we've seen in Wisconsin, is in 2016, there was in Minnesota, they passed the pollinator friendly designation for solar. And that's now expanded to, I think, 9 or 10 different states. And I think, and Wisconsin is not on that list. I know that I think some developers are doing it optionally, or, you know, we've heard that, I think on Badger Hollow, they're going to do that. However, if it's actually official, and then developers could actually meet certain standards to make sure that their large solar projects meet pollinator standards, or looking beyond pollinator standards, even agrivoltaics or range voltaics, I think would be something to be really interesting and put Wisconsin on the leading edge there.
You know, Andy, that's interesting, because we looked a little bit at pollinator habitat under some of our ground mounted arrays that we just installed at the college, and I actually think that's an area that's would be good for a lot more research. You know, when we looked at putting it on one of our campuses, you know, everybody thinks about pollinators being butterflies, which would be lovely. But if it's, you know, wasps or hornets and our maintenance folks can't mow underneath those arrays anymore, that's a nightmare for us, right? And I think, you know, there's room to do a lot more looking at, you know, what is the vegetation that exists there currently? What type of species are we planting? What type of species are we attracting? And I think that's would be a great area for research at, you know, the university or maybe some of the technical college campuses to do some demonstration projects on that and really figure out where the optimal value is and how we design that sort of thing. And it may be that some places are more appropriate for the others. Maybe other places are more appropriate for grazing animals or something like that beneath the arrays. I think, you know, that broad field of agrovoltaics is, you know, wide open for a lot of scientific research.
Just to dovetail on that, Ken, the other thing I've wondered about is, you know, how much research has gone into actually looking at the carbon sequestration that is associated with perennial plantings, you know, around those solar setups as well. Just thinking about, yeah, carbon capture and mitigation on that end. This is John Greenler.
Yeah, it's a good thought. I mean, it's something that we'd certainly be interested to look at in one of our future solar installations if we put the right research project together with a team with the right expertise and maybe found some, you know, federal agency to fund it.
Getting back to what Scott was talking about earlier about load shifting and demand and all that, you know, we're going to be a growing electric fleet here in Wisconsin. And I know Denmark, I think for some time has, you know, figured out somewhat how to integrate storage in electric vehicles. And I'm not sure, you know, how much thinking or planning we're doing ahead for that here as our fleet grows as to how that might integrate into the system. So I think that's worth studying as well.
You know, there's a lot of elephants in the room here. The biggest one I'm looking at is this $14 billion, okay, that you're throwing out of the state. And it just seems to me that if that $14 billion stayed in the state, a number of the problems we're talking about here would go a long way to solving this. Now, I'm going to use a word here that's probably going to get people going crazy, but you know, back in the early 90s, the state had a problem with the distribution of energy, particularly the smaller areas, and all the utilities got together. I don't know if they had a shotgun to their head, then formed the ATC. So what if all the utilities got together, okay, with a bullwhip or a shotgun or whatever, and said, let's address this $14 billion collectively, and they donated their assets or their activities or whatever in a cooperative way, and over a period of time, 10 years, 5 years, 25 years, or whatever, we self-generate within the state and bring this $14 billion in here and create a lot of jobs, create a lot of supply chain activities. Southeastern Wisconsin is a big supplier or manufacturer of mid-voltage equipment, you know, which a lot of this is. And maybe that's another approach to this. Okay, is to somehow or another, you know, I don't know what drove the model to get all the utilities, all the co-ops, et cetera, to donate their distribution assets into a pool of money and create American Transmission. Why couldn't a model like that or whatever drove that get this moving? And that would create a lot of jobs. You know, a lot of this equipment could be placed in brownfields. I could see, you know, 57 pages of benefits here. But with the overarching thing is it would bring into the state and retain in the state all this money, which could be, you know, which would make the economy boom, or at least a lot of it could go to the rural areas where we might build some of these places. So just a thought here. It's a little different, but it addresses, you know, one of the overall issues there.
Chester, I wasn't around when ATC was formed, but my understanding of the history is that the utilities were ordered to separate off their transmission assets from the rest of their operations. So there was a directive that was given to them that they had to comply with. So, you know, I suppose we could issue all kinds of directives if we were in charge. You know? I did want to piggyback on the comment about electric vehicles, though. You know, just to put that in perspective, we've looked at some EV charger infrastructure at our college campuses, and you know, if you look at a level 1 charger, that's no big deal. That draws about, you know, as much power as a hair dryer. If you look at a level 2 charger, it gets to be, you know, 4 or 5 times that. If you look at a Tesla supercharger, that's drawing 150 kilowatts, which if we put just one of those at one of our regional campuses, it would double our electric demand. So, you know, I think if we're gonna put EV infrastructure everywhere we need it, we need to think about how that impacts the electric bills for public charging, and what the rate structures look like if we're really going to try and support vehicle charging at workplaces. That's a real challenge to figure out.
Piggybacking on the EV charging, I'll just share this idea a friend of mine passed along. And I'm just curious whether this has policy implications, but basically he was contending that all these gas stations / convenience stores, in order to maintain business as the economy shifts to EVs, which we're all projecting, including the big company, you know, big car manufacturers, is going to happen, they will want to provide EV charging capacity to be able to keep their business model afloat. And of course, they have some of the same issues that Ken just raised, but they would have businesses to back up that model. They want people to drive in and stop and buy food and buy energy, whether it's gas or electric. And so whether there be a way to facilitate or accelerate or streamline that possibility, but we could see public charging become available without the public having to pay for it if we align business incentives to make it happen.
Or even what makes more sense to me is that the utilities, I mean, it's going to create a mass amount of demand for them. Why aren't the utilities stepping up to be the ones to provide that infrastructure? And I don't know what policy other than like PSC directives you could have, but they're the most obvious, since they're the ones that are supplying the fuel for our EVs. But I wanted to just kind of mention, and I know I remember your list in the beginning, Maria, so we're sort of working towards Chester's comments about economics started moving into that and keeping that $14 billion in our state. But I'm sure this will ring true with everyone, and it's something that especially Ken, but being in this industry, we don't have the people to do this. Like, it doesn't matter how many pieces of policy we put together and how many jobs we want to create, we are failing at getting young people into the trades and getting excited about this work. And I don't know, maybe the answer is to make trade schools begin at the age of 16 and be free, and really take some young people and kind of help them into this in a smoother way, or even begin to pay them early on, kind of like an apprentice program, you know, that they do in the unions. Yeah, I actually can think of some policy around that, but I don't know how you would get that passed unless you already agree with this need for tradespeople, because once we create these jobs, we got to have them ready to go.
Yeah, can chime in a little bit? Okay, so yeah, good conversation, folks. So I thought to focus on another renewable source that often we forget about, that we are, half of the state is forested. We have, tons of this woody biomass. And also being a dairy state, we have all this other kind of biomass that potentially could be used for biogas. And what we are lacking there, I mean, with the cheaper, this natural gas for heating, most of this is school, and although many of these schools, more than 250 of them, the school districts have this school forests, which are being used for these educational purposes mostly. And we are actually continuing a research currently looking into that, barriers and challenges of using those woody biomass potentially for heating school districts. And looking into not only that cost factor, I mean, we know that it is hard to compete with this current price of this natural gas. And so along with that line, I just put one link into the chat box. I mean, Minnesota has this production incentive from the biomass for heating. So yes, we know biomass is included within that tax exempt for the sales tax exempt, but can we think of some sort of pro-incentivizing this sector for the biomass, whether it is for woody biomass for heating and electricity, and also how we can incentivize more in the biogas sector so that we can utilize, because it is not only that making that economic sense, we have to think of the ecosystem management for utilizing some of this, because if we just increase this forest floor, I mean, we have to use certainly an optimum way, but with this increased fire risk and other ecological system maintenance, those environmental values come in. And for the biogas aspects as well, I think the other values of nutrient management and then clean water and all those issues come in added to that. So yeah, my point here is that as we are thinking about the policies, can we follow some of the other states are following, and at what level we can make that incentive so that it makes sense to go forward with those kind of initiatives, because currently we are struggling on that.
Sheila, I have a question for you. So the incentive, is it incentivizing the producer? Is it incentivizing the equipment? Is it incentivizing the interconnection? Like, where in the pipeline is that incentive, and where would it be most impactful when it comes to biogas, for example? Sorry.
Right. I mean, what I understand from the Minnesota program, they incentivize, I think, $5 per MMBTUs. So, I mean, and depending on who invests or who is investing for that, that money could be retrieved from that end. So, if it is the school is investing, from the community money, that money could come back from that end as much they are producing from that source, they get that money back. And also they can take advantage of this, renewable energy tax exempt.
I would just add a little bit of a caution to that, because I just read an article today in The Guardian, or there was one in there anyhow, that in Europe, where they're using a lot of biomass, in this case it's sometimes forests, that they're actually reducing the sequestration and so on. So I think you need to take a look at the total life cycle impacts and how that plays into our clean energy goals and how that fits. I want to move a little bit different direction though and pick up, because Alicia especially was talking about jobs and so on, something I've been thinking about, because this was pointed out earlier too, a lot of the jobs in clean energy in this state are in energy efficiency and especially retrofitting. And, a lot of the inequities that are going on in this state and energy burdens are especially with low income people who often have less efficient homes and appliances and everything else. I'm wondering if, first of all, the utilities often, have figures on, especially for low income people, for the people in the LIHEAP program, about low income people that need support, that are using a lot of energy. And maybe we could, figure out through the utilities otherwise, and then try to target communities of color such that you would work with building industries, provide them support so they could train people in those communities to both have regular jobs, maybe even initially, you would just train them at a low level to be able to help within their own community, empower them to help their neighbors and so on, to do like low level work and low level analysis too, to look at their energy bills, to just educate them. And then if it needs, much more work, you would have people who are officially employed, but you'd be training people for that, as part of the retrofitting industry. Or you would have somebody come in and do a full energy audit if that was warranted, and that could be done. But this would add to equity, it would add to jobs, it would take care of a lot of the low-level energy demand, where we can start to even things out and reduce some of the highest impact energy loss we've got rolling right now, especially since we've got a huge problem in this state with old energy building codes, at least for residential. So if we can start addressing some of that, where people need jobs, where people need support to reduce their energy bills, and reduce energy loads where it's easily done at lower costs, I think that would be a great benefit, to put money into that and bring in industries where they already are training people for jobs and help communities in need of help.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. I'm not providing a lot of feedback. I'm just doing a lot of listening, so I appreciate the input. One area we haven't really talked about, which I think is also very important, is Wisconsin's an industrial state. We have a lot of manufacturing here. And I just, that's another sector that we really want to focus in on. And so, retaining business and industry and manufacturing here is really important. But the footprint and the say the way that they're pretty reliant on natural gas, and they have a heavy thermal load, and how do we tackle that? How do we help deploy renewables in this sector? Just throwing out the industrial sector, because we haven't really had a discussion on that, and just some thoughts related to that particular sector.
Well, hasn't MWork kind of identified that there's a lot of industrial infrastructure that lends itself to microgrids, and it seems like there's a natural synergy there to provide support and encouragement that, I think in terms of governmental policy, it would make a lot of sense to encourage municipalities, at least initially, to develop some core microgrid to provide resilience in the event of some disaster, whether it's a flood, a heat wave, something that brings parts of the grid down, to have low, like a police station and firehouse, public school with a large gymnasium wired up so that if we lose power and we have to move people who are on the verge of heat exhaustion, or just keep the police station running in the middle of something. I mean, it seems like there could be some real synergy, like pilot projects that would happen focused on municipalities. Actually, I think there's been some talk in Middleton and our sustainability committee about trying to make something like that happen. So
you're saying like supporting, directing funding to support like a cross-sector microgrid project, something like
exactly.
that? Okay.
With a mind towards resilience as a community, not just resilience or climate change reduction, but having that as an added benefit. And we have the industrial base to tap to make that happen. And that would be demonstration projects for them to advertise.
Yeah. Megan, I see your face appeared. Do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I've been really enjoying listening to the conversation as a state employee for the State Energy Office. I just wanted to comment, Kermit, great idea. And we have some statutory responsibility to plan for shortages and energy security. So we are currently discussing, and should be releasing in the next couple of months a memo for public comment on critical infrastructure microgrids and community resilience centers. This concept was approved in April of last year by the commission. So now we're coming back with sort of a full memo to say we realize, and this really came through petroleum shortage contingency planning, right? So we looked at any mid-sized county in the state, and we thought that if critical infrastructure went down, we would literally need more than 300,000 gallons of diesel to run hospitals, to run wastewater treatment, to run all the things that we need. So we don't have a lot of money for this. We have really the capability to do some feasibility studies, but I think as we track the programs on each coast, Connecticut, New York, California, folks are doing this. All of them took a phased approach. So we hope that we can start doing this, get some studies in the ground. And then Xcel Energy also has an interesting microgrid for certain industrial customers and municipalities too. So I think the momentum is moving this way, but it's great to hear that folks are thinking about it and that you're on the same page.
Thank you, Megan. That's exciting. So looking at the time here, we have 4 minutes. So what I think I'd like to do is do a last call. We've covered a lot of topics. If you haven't had a chance to speak up, do that now, please. I'd encourage you, or go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat. I will be getting the chat box information sent to me. Jim, I see you've popped up too. I didn't know if you had any particular comments you wanted to make, but I just want to open it up for the last couple minutes to anybody who hasn't made a comment or has some last minute thoughts as well.
Yeah, this is Jim Bullion. I do the government affairs for Renew Wisconsin. I'd be glad to act as a conduit, because if you're like me, you always think of that question that you wanted to ask, or get that information 10 minutes after the meeting ends. So feel free to reach out to me or to any of the other Renew staff if you want to follow up. Maria and I and the other state agency folks are on regular communication. So that's why I kind of laid low and didn't say anything, because I get a chance to talk to Maria regularly, but you guys don't. So I'm glad you spoke up, and I support it, and was really interested in all your comments as well. So we really thank everybody for coming. And yeah, if there's any last questions or comments, feel free to throw them out there. But if nothing else, we really appreciate your coming and hope you enjoyed the summit.
Great. Well, not hearing any, again, I don't want to interrupt you, so feel free to interrupt me if you really have something to say. But from a planning perspective, just so you all know, our timeline is to get a clean energy plan on the streets by early April of this year. Also, part of that is it's not just about creating a clean energy plan. That's a document that just sits there. As Joel probably, I think, mentioned in his talk on Tuesday, it is a living document where we're constantly updating, checking ourselves, making sure that we're evolving with the times and evolving with technology and evolving with reality. And so really what we're doing in the next couple of months is setting up that framework and identifying the things that we can do immediately out the gate, looking at our programs, working across agencies to see what tools do we have in place already to get things going? Where do we need to make little tweaks to be able to start moving the needle and really thinking about sustainability and clean energy in the state? So I will throw my email address in the chat, and feel free if you have ideas or thoughts or want to talk. I'm open to having these conversations, especially over the next couple of months as we're setting this up. But open door policy here, please reach out. And I'm really, really thankful that you joined us today and provided so much context and information. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maria.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Maria. You did a great job.
Thanks for moderating a good discussion, Maria.
Ditto on the thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice job today, Ken. I saw you in a couple of different places. Everywhere I turned around, there you were.
You know, this is different than any past renewable energy summit, but I enjoyed it. I got to see a bunch of speakers that otherwise probably wouldn't have traveled to Wisconsin in the middle of January to be with us. So,
Yeah.
We were having our staff debriefing yesterday afternoon, and we kind of said we want to go back to a live conference, but we may be able to take away some of these things and keep it permanent going forward, just because there are some benefits. I mean, you don't worry about speakers coming in from Washington, D.C. getting snowed out in January in Wisconsin.
yeah, absolutely.
And this interactive stuff, you don't get a discussion like that in a room with 50 people.
Yeah. I mean, it may be the sort of thing that in the future we have a live conference event in January, but we can do some virtual webinar sort of things with the community. You know, shorter duration events that are throughout the year to keep people with their foot on the accelerator pedal and keep the momentum going, you know?
Right. Because the biggest learning curve is not with the people putting them on, it's the people using it and being willing to come and do it.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to hop off. I have to meet with the Lieutenant Governor's office and talk about printing the climate change report. So very important work.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Better
great.
go.
Looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, we're printing it. So if you want a copy, just email me, let me know. I can get you on the list. You can get a printed version of it.
Can we get a signed copy?
I'll have Lieutenant Governor sign it.
Yeah,
Is that in addition to being online?
It's online, but
It's already, okay, that's what I thought. I
it'll be
thought
in
I'd
addition-
seen it
yeah,
before.
it'll
but-
be in addition to. So, yeah. Okay, I have to head out, but
Thanks.
thank
We'll
you
see
guys
Maria.
so much. Appreciate
Bye,
it.
everyone.
Bye.